Coming up in today's newscast, Israel gets blamed again for airstrikes in northern Syria. New information comes to light from the recently revealed Iranian nuclear archives, and the first episode of Sacha Baron Cohen's new Showtime series comes out, and it looks like no one is safe. For the first time ever, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán will be arriving in Israel for an official state visit. Ties with the somewhat isolated nation of Hungary have been warming considerably over the last year, but while some hailed this as another impressive accomplishment of Prime Minister Netanyahu, others are distressed to see Israel welcoming a foreign leader whose platform is littered with traces of anti-Semitism and Nazi approval. Prime Minister Netanyahu has repeatedly been trying to improve ties with the controversial Hungarian PM for quite some time now. When Orbán was re-elected back in April, Netanyahu was said to be the first foreign leader to congratulate him on the win. That was also when the invite to Israel was first extended, an offer that Prime Minister Orbán is taking him up on today. Orbán will spend 2 days touring the Jewish state, and the trip will include stops at the Knesset, the Western Wall, and the Yad Vashem Holocaust Museum. For some, though, Orbán's visit to Israel's Holocaust Memorial Center comes with some painful irony. Orbán has publicly backed his country's former leader, Miklos Horthy, who personally allied with the Nazis and oversaw the deportation of 500,000 Jews to the Auschwitz death camp. Orbán's criticism of the EU immigration policies have also been accused of harboring disturbing traces of anti-Semitism. Last year, the Hungarian leader spearheaded a billboard campaign attacking Jewish Hungarian-American activist George Soros. It was widely seen as evoking the memories of Nazi propaganda. Despite the concerns of Jewish groups in Israel and abroad, though, Netanyahu has made a potential friendship with Orbán a top priority. Israeli officials have even been coordinating with the Trump administration to help build those ties. Clearly, Netanyahu sees a potential alliance with Hungary as a win-win situation for all sides. Hungary isn't the only country in the EU that Prime Minister Netanyahu is trying to form stronger ties with. In fact, Hungary is part of a four-country voting bloc in the European Union known as the Visegrad, which includes Poland, the Czech Republic, and Slovakia as well. And while the Visegrad countries all have a troubled past with the Nazi regime, all four are seen today as right-wing and pro-Israel. Well, joining me now with more on the expanding relations between Israel and Visegrad countries is Davide Hermelin, the president of the International Center for Public Diplomacy in Israel. Davide, it's a pleasure to have you back. Thank you for coming.
Hello to you.
All right, so my first question is, coming off of our last story, here we have Hungarian Prime Minister Orbán coming to Israel, and a lot of people have objected to his visit and really warming ties in general with Hungary based on their troubled past with the Nazi regime. So what do you make of all this?
Based on the fake news or today, maybe. Viktor Orbán is for sure not anti-Semitic, and also his party is not anti-Semitic. I can say so with a deep knowledge about this party, since I'm regular guest of organizations of this party. I have personal friends in high positions in this party. I began my international career many years ago as guest of the young organization of this party. I can tell you that one of the last former chairmen of the young organization of the party and the young student organization of this party came from a Jewish family, and he's very proud of his Jewish roots, and he visited Israel at least one time. So all of those fake news, it's about time to end it. The center-right party of Hungary is a very legitimate center-right party, period.
So where is all of this criticism really coming from, and why is it being given credence?
Because of leftist campaign to delegitimize governments who are supporting Israel. Why people said that the party of Mr. Orbán is anti-Semitic? Because they criticized the party, the involvement allegedly of Mr. Soros, George Soros,
sure,
against the central-right parties in Europe, but also here in Israel. We are against the brutal involvement, allegedly, of Mr. Soros in our politics, in very, let's say, suspicious way. So if someone criticized someone who is accidentally a Jew, especially if this Jew is very anti-Israeli, so to say that the party of Mr. Orbán is anti-Semitic, this is completely untrue.
All right, so tell me a little bit more about George Soros. What policies exactly are people so vehemently against that he's trying to implement with his funding or with his sway?
This is different topic, the involvement of big foreign money in the Israeli politics, and as I understand, also in the European politics. Sure. This is totally different discussion, but something that is important.
Soros is Hungarian, though.
His roots, at least. I don't know where he lives, to be honest, but the point is that also the other governments that you mentioned, in Czech Republic, the Prime Minister is more or less independent, supported by the left wing and by the extreme left. In Slovakia, the Prime Minister, the main coalition partner, should I say, are the socialists, supported by center-right Hungarian party of minority, of the Hungarian minority in Slovakia, and by the right-wing populists, which are smaller than the main party of the socialists. So to say that we have here alliance of central-right government, this is just, it's not true.
Not true.
It's not true. But it is true, by the way, Slovakia, compared to the others, is very pro-EU. Also, the other governments are pro-EU. But they have, if it's my place to judge as outsider, they have more sense about the policy of the EU. The policy of the EU until now, of the main countries of the EU, especially Germany, with all due respect, and I have a lot of, I met Chancellor Angela Merkel several times, let's say it like that. But this policy of the immigration was wrong. And you can see that the legitimate central-right parties, like the party of the best friend of Israel now, maybe in Europe, Sebastian Kurz, which we are personal friends as well, the Chancellor of Austria, they now have more sense when they come to judge the questions about immigration. And if someone want to protect itself, it doesn't mean that he is fascist or right-winger. No, it doesn't mean that you should kill yourself to save someone else. And I think that those four countries, they have more sense compared to the more Western countries in Europe. And this is why they can talk with the Israeli sense, which, if I can say, and I'm not objective, as you know, I'm a Likud member, I'm a big supporter of Prime Minister Netanyahu, sure. But in the bottom line, we see that the policy of the Likud and Prime Minister Netanyahu is correct. So I'm happy that we have strong allies also in the EU.
So is that why you think that Netanyahu is trying so desperately, or maybe not desperately, but so much to get in with the Visegrad and kind of separate himself from other EU countries, namely Germany or whoever else it is? I
wouldn't say that he would like to separate himself. First of all, who said where the majority is? I think that the majority of the EU countries can understand, and also with countries that we have some disagreements. You mentioned Germany about some issues. Still, Germany is the best friend of Israel as a country in Europe. No one can deny it right now. But the structure of the EU is like a domino effect. Until now, all the BDS movements and the anti-Israeli politicians, they were using this system to criticize Israel, and because the structure of the EU, everything is going together, sure. So the criticism spread around.
Well, and I know that the Visegrad countries can vote it down.
So if we have allies and we can add to the EU's policy pro-Israeli attitude, so why not? This is the duty of any Israeli prime minister, and I'm happy enough that this is Netanyahu is understanding the structure of the EU, and not people who would like to satisfy the EU without understanding the possibilities and the path to defend the Israeli interest there.
All right, Davidi Hermelin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Now, we've just learned that Hamas is allegedly working to halt the deadly incendiary kite and balloon attacks coming out of the Gaza Strip. This report comes on the heels of some of the most turbulent days in recent memory between Israel and Palestinians in Gaza, tensions that are threatening to spiral into war. Egypt is said to have successfully convinced Hamas to put an end to these homemade firebomb attacks before they start a war, and many see these attacks as a sign of growing desperation and hopelessness from Gazans, who have used paper kites, balloons, and even condoms to fly booby-trapped explosives into Israeli territory. Those attacks have devastated Israeli agriculture in the south, but they've also had some very close calls with human lives. Just yesterday, one such firebomb landed outside a kindergarten in the city of Sderot, where children were playing. Thankfully, no one was injured, but Hamas is now apparently ordering its factions to halt the practice altogether, at least for the time being. Make no mistake, however, this is likely a strategic choice for the terror group. Israel has shuttered the Kerem Shalom crossing checkpoint twice in the last 2 weeks because of these repeated attacks. On top of that, Hamas is probably hoping to avoid all-out war at this time. But for now, it remains to be seen if these attacks will truly be halted. Speaking of the ceasefire, Israel's lack of faith in Hamas is most apparent in that the IDF has just ordered a massive military drill to prepare for a war in Gaza, should the incendiary balloons and kites continue. Hamas has been given until Friday to truly end the practice, and in what has largely been interpreted as a thinly veiled threat to Hamas, the IDF's 162nd Armored Division on Sunday began their exercises. The drills included multiple potential fronts, including the capturing of Gaza City. Hamas, in preparation to adhere to the Friday deadline, has already dispatched units to over 60 positions along the Gaza-Israel border. According to Israeli Channel 10 News, all remaining posts will be manned by the end of the week as well. With the summer recess fast approaching, the Knesset is pushing new bills at a record pace. But this newest law may be perhaps one of the biggest so far. The Knesset has just approved legislation that officially revokes the High Court's jurisdiction over the West Bank, and more specifically, over land disputes between Jews and Palestinians in the West Bank. ILTV's Brett Allen Smith is here to explain some of this. Now, Brett, what exactly does all this mean?
Okay, so as you said, the new law strips away the High Court's authority over land dispute cases in the West Bank. And what happens now is that if Palestinians want to make a dispute, they have to take those files and claims and put them in Israel's administrative court. And I know that sounds kind of like, minutia here, but it really isn't. It's actually a very big, maybe historic even, change to how the State of Israel's justice system is going to address future annexation in the Palestinian territories. The first time in 51 years, actually, that jurisdiction has shifted hands. It's a major shift.
All right, so break this down for us then. What is the difference between the High Court and the Administrative Court?
Okay, so the first difference to take in mind is that the High Court is just a bigger web of judges who probably have overall a bit more experience with cases regarding a land dispute. I mean, these are the same judges who have already overseen these cases for the last few decades, so they have more experience. The administrative courts, on the other hand, are much smaller, and tellingly, they're generally seen as more supportive of Jewish causes in the occupied territories, or more specifically the policy of cultivating and spreading, the settlements in the West Bank. But maybe the biggest difference here is that the administrative system is basically tantamount to Israeli proper law, and that means that cases concerning disputes in Area C of the Palestinian West Bank will now fall under what is essentially Israeli sovereignty, if that makes sense.
All right, yeah, a bit, yeah. Okay. So, I mean, I can see why this is probably a fairly divisive new approach then. I know the Israeli government has often clashed with the High Court on a number of issues, including Jewish settlements, as you said. This is the same system that had the Amona outpost evacuated, actually. But then again, the courts are merely interpreting Israel's own laws. So along those lines, won't we see similar rulings from the administrative courts as well?
Honestly, I doubt it. I seriously doubt it, because first and foremost, the administrative system is specifically geared to Israeli citizens. I mean, Palestinians will now simply just have 10 times more paperwork to do and quadruple the court fees and legal fees to pay just to submit a claim in the first place, let alone climb the ladder. And let's not forget that there are Israeli and Palestinian NGOs, of course, that often enter the mix there. For them, the mere fact that Israel is placing disputed territory under the sovereignty of its own laws is a serious declaration of its intent to fully annex the West Bank, regardless of international law. Now, proponents of this law say that it just equalizes Israelis in the West Bank with Israelis in Israel. But I think Justice Minister Ayelet Shaked really made the true intent clear when she said the party of petition filed to the High Court of Palestinian extreme leftists would end, and that, quote, settlement development will continue.
All right, well, we'll certainly have a lot more to talk about this in the very near future then. Thanks for the details, Brett.
Of course.
Mere hours before the final vote was set to begin, the Prime Minister himself interceded to withdraw the Knesset's so-called Facebook bill from the day's schedule. This proposal was originally designed to block content from social media sites such as Facebook that the state believed incited violence. But the text of the bill, which essentially applied to any website or news site such as this one, was apparently nixed when Netanyahu realized just how far-reaching the law would be. Conservative members of Netanyahu's coalition initially applauded the bill when it passed its first reading earlier this month. But that applause was met with fierce criticism by those who worried that the text could be utilized for an unprecedented censorship of any media critical of the government. People routinely use sites like Facebook and Twitter to publish their own personal views of the state and its policies. But in Israel, the line between dissidents and calls for violence can sometimes be strangely blurred. The memory of the 2015 stabbing intifada is still fresh in Israel's minds. During this turbulent period, Palestinian terrorists randomly stabbed Israeli citizens and soldiers all over the country in a wave largely driven by lone wolf terrorists and organized through social media. This is precisely the type of bloodshed that Israeli lawmakers say they were targeting with this bill. But Netanyahu himself is shining a light on just how wide-reaching the text truly is. By giving the Justice Department the power to block content anywhere on the web without a trial or an opportunity to present evidence, the law could have become a powerful censorship tool, the likes of which Israel has never seen. The fear here is that the law could have been abused to wipe out even nonviolent content that merely resembled public dissidents, and apparently most MKs weren't even aware of that clause in the bill to begin with. When asked, Knesset members largely believed that the wording only applied to Facebook and Twitter. Even the bill's original sponsor, Revital Swede, said that the text went, quote, far beyond what she originally backed, and that, quote, no one knew this was the meaning of the bill. And with the bill now off the table entirely, Netanyahu has asked that the text be reworked to target only terror incitement. The Knesset's bill concerning pregnancies by way of surrogacies has seen quite the back and forth over the last few days. The text was widely criticized for excluding surrogacy rights to same-sex partners, while at the same time extending those rights to single women. On Sunday, Prime Minister Netanyahu himself sided with the LGBTQ+ community and demanded the bill be rewritten. But today, roughly 48 hours later, Netanyahu has apparently pulled a complete 180. The Prime Minister has just voted against surrogacy rights for same-sex couples.
חבר הכנסת אמיר אוחנה דיבר איתי לא פעם על חוק הפונדקאות. הוא העלה נקודה מאוד פשוטה. לאמהות יחידניות יש זכות לתהליך פונדקאות, אבל לאבות יחידנים אין זכות כזו. זה פשוט לא הוגן. וצריך לתקן את זה. ולכן הודעתי לו היום בישיבת סיעת הליכוד שאני אתמוך בתיקון החוק שהוא יגיש.
Despite his initial criticism of the bill as just not fair, Netanyahu has voted yes on the current version of the bill, which excludes same-sex couples from pursuing a pregnancy through a third-party surrogate. The Prime Minister initially argued that it wasn't fair for single mothers to be granted surrogacy rights, but not single fathers. A position embraced with cheers from the LGBTQ+ community, which has been fighting for equal rights for decades now. Israel has often touted itself as being possibly the only safe haven for same-sex couples in the entire Middle East, but equality laws for this community have often been less than forthcoming. This is largely seen to be the case because of the huge makeup of ultra-Orthodox parties in the current coalition. Also, ultra-Orthodox Knesset leaders typically strike down any laws promoting LGBTQ+ equality rights, including same-sex marriage, adoption, and partner rights. The suspicion is that here, too, the religious wing of the coalition has likely lobbied Netanyahu to walk back his initial support of same-sex surrogacy. Netanyahu made a similar about-face earlier this year when his coalition uniformly condemned a deal with the UN to safely relocate half of Israel's African asylum seekers to Western countries. Less than 24 hours after presenting that deal, which he called the best one possible, Netanyahu froze and then canceled it completely. In any case, thousands of Israelis are continuing to picket for LGBTQ+ rights, and though disappointed by this bump in the road, this is clearly a war that they'll continue to fight. 2 Hungarian tourists have just been busted for trying to steal artifacts from Auschwitz, the infamous Nazi death camp in Poland. The tourists were presumably visiting the site on either a vacation or an educational trip, which is when they decided to steal several bricks from the Auschwitz grounds and smuggle them out with their bag. This isn't the first time people have tried to steal from the former death camp. In this case, the 2 Hungarian nationals, a man and woman both in their 30s, were caught in the act by another pair of tourists. Security was notified and the suspects were immediately discovered with the bricks in their bag. According to them, they didn't realize that you couldn't do this and merely wanted to return home with a souvenir. The 2 have since admitted to attempted theft, a crime that comes with a $400 fine and a suspended jail sentence of 1 year. There's been a growing consensus among historians and Holocaust scholars that modern generations are becoming more and more out of touch with the gruesome lessons learned from Hitler's final solution. The idea of even wanting a souvenir from a place that saw hundreds of thousands of Jewish lives liquidated certainly adds some troubling credence to that feeling. Step aside, folks, because the next time you're in a line in Israel, a pregnant woman may just cut in front of you. Don't freak out, though, not just because you should let pregnant women cut ahead of you anyway, but because the Knesset just passed a new bill that will let them jump in the line. The idea is that expecting mothers can now avoid waiting for any extended periods of time, and the list of places they can cut lines in is sure to bring a smile to their faces. In a move to crack down on gender inequality, the Knesset just unanimously voted to let expecting mothers skip lines in public spaces. The new law applies just about everywhere, from supermarkets to pharmacies, the post office, and anywhere else that provides a public service. Service providers will have the right to ask women to show medical proof that they're pregnant, though, while trying to skip past the crowd. Joint Arab List Knesset member Youssef Jabarin initiated the bill after traveling abroad with his pregnant wife. Jabarin and his wife almost left a store after seeing a long line, but she was then told that she didn't need to wait, and the idea to make this an Israeli law clicked. Without opposition, the law will amend the Women's Equal Rights Act of 1951, making this the latest in a series of expanded aid for expecting mothers. Last year, for example, the Knesset also extended paid maternity leave from 14 to 15 weeks. Hatzalah, the well-known EMS corps in New York City, might have to make room for some competition, at least when it comes to caring for female patients in need. 93 Queens, a documentary detailing a group of women from Borough Park called Ezras Nashim, which translates to helping women, shows how they are contributing to help for Jewish Orthodox women in emergency situations. Touching the opposite gender who isn't one's spouse is forbidden in Jewish Orthodox circles. And yes, this can even include sometimes emergency situations when a woman might want to be treated by a female EMT rather than a man. But that's why Ezras Nashim is showing the world how they're doing the unthinkable by finding a way to ease that tension for those in trouble. Queens 93, set to come out in theaters across New York City and Los Angeles before being released elsewhere, documents how this group of women turned uncomfortable situations into ones that can ease female patients' minds when they need it the most. Rather than being treated by the all-male volunteer Hatzalah, Ezras Nashim gives women an alternative. And though Ezras Nashim was created as a response to an all-male service, they do treat men as well. Rachel Freier, who is the first Hasidic female American judge, is the mastermind behind this group. And the documentary, created by Orthodox filmmaker Paula Eiselt, shows Freier's trials and tribulations from only allowing married women to join her team, to sexist comments by community members, and how Ezras Nashim even survived without having an ambulance of its own. But it doesn't seem like anything will stop this Hasidic group from saving lives. Have you ever wanted to order jewelry online and then you get it in the mail and it just wasn't what you expected? The size wasn't right or it doesn't look the way you wanted? Well, ILTV's Emmanuel Kadosh is here to tell us all about the startup that will fix this problem by molding artificial reality with jewelry.
Thanks, Aaron. Well, an Israeli startup called Innova is looking to use augmented reality to help online shoppers buy jewelry in a more effective and efficient way. Now, how are they planning on doing this? It's pretty similar to some other AR online shopping sites where you take a picture of your hand, more specifically with this specific software, send it to the website, and then you'll receive back an image of your hand with the ring that you chose to try on. Now, I've seen this before with, sunglasses and clothes, things like that, but it's never really been super accurate, so I'm hoping this is going to be a lot more realistic.
Yeah, no, I actually, even for me with Warby Parker, I know they have similar technology, but, so this is only for hand jewelry, though?
At the moment, the software only works with hands, but will supposedly eventually also show how earrings and necklaces look on people, so hopefully all those jewelry online shoppers can have the opportunity to try them on without having to actually, leave their house, similar to the to the fashion app Zeekit that lets you try on clothes virtually.
All right. Now, from what I understand, though, this is one of the first startups that was chosen to take part in a special incubation program, right? Right.
That's correct. The Israeli Diamond Exchange started the incubation program earlier this year in an effort to help provide support and financing to startups that developed advanced technology specifically for the diamond industry. Of course, they expect that, in turn, the initiative will help boost the local diamond industry, which has been suffering from low profitability.
Well, that's definitely exciting. For me, I'm probably more looking forward to the software to be more developed so I can try on, bracelets and other things. But as for rings, I make my own.
Yes, you do.
but this technology is definitely going to be the next big thing, for sure. I mean, people are literally never going to leave their houses anymore.
Online shopping.
Once everything becomes virtual and online, exactly. Emmanuel, thank you so much.
Thank you.
The Hebrew word of the day is brought to you by IDC Samru Ulpan, open to everyone. And now for our Hebrew word of the day. I love going places. It's always great to travel to a land far, far away, and that's why today's word is lehagia, or to arrive. Now here in Israel, if I megia, or arrive, then it's customary to greet me with bruchim habayim, meaning blessed are those who come here. It's a fancy way of saying welcome, but you hear it all the time. When you megia or arrive at a restaurant, or even sometimes at a government office, assuming the clerk is having a good day, of course. And with that, let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight's sky will be clear with a low of 77 or 25 degrees Celsius. Tomorrow you can expect clear skies and warm weather with a high of 87 or 31 degrees Celsius. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.64 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv, and don't forget to follow us on Facebook at Israel English News and on Twitter at ILTV News. I'm Aaron Porras. Thank you for watching.